Defining critical literacy. So, what critical literacy is not is that it's not traditional critical thinking skills or problem solving skills necessarily. In this term, critical means to question power, perspectives, and positionings within a text. Critical literacy asks for readers to deconstruct text, reconstruct them, and take social action. Alan Luke defines critical literacy this way. The term critical literacy refers to use of the technologies of print and other media of communication to analyze, critique, and transform the norms, rule systems, and practices governing the social fields of everyday life. When Luke says technologies of print and other forms of media, he's referring to print in many ways: books, magazines, film, commercials, social media. And to engage in analysis of it or critique of it, we question it about who wrote it, for what purpose, who's left out, how does it frame the people or the position or the ideologies within the text. And then it goes one step further to question how the text might be rewritten. Let's look at another definition. Barbara Culmer, an Australian scholar, defined critical literacy as pedagogical moves. So it repositions students or ourselves as researchers of language. It respects student resistance in exploring minority culture constructions of literacy. And it problematizes classroom and public text. So, for instance, it may take traditional textbooks and problematize how the history of a nation or a culture has been represented in that textbook. Let's look at another quote by Stephanie Jones. She argued that critical literacy eludes definition and that the theories and lenses informing it must be discussed. She claims that critical literacy includes recursive and reflexive practices that are engaged by powerful agents to deconstruct and reconstruct text, textual practices, and social relations where such practices take place. I want to go back to this claim that Stephanie Jones makes here that critical literacy can't always be clearly defined because it depends on the theory and the lens that you're using to do your critical literacy. So, for instance, when you're engaging in critical literacy, you might put on a lens that is more feminist and that you might be looking at how gender is displayed in a text or a commercial. Whereas in another form of analysis, you could look at class and how are middle class versus working class people being portrayed in a text. So, some origins of critical literacy. You may have heard of critical pedagogy, and certainly critical literacy can be considered a subset of critical pedagogy. Often we trace critical pedagogy to a seminal text titled The Pedagogy of the Impressed, written by Paulo Freire. It was published in 1968 in Brazil, but didn't reach the United States until the early 1970s. Some key people working in critical pedagogy are Ira Shor. Ira Shor was a student of Paulo Freire. Peter McLaren and Henry Giroux are known for bringing critical pedagogy to the United States educational system and research base. Bell Hooks and Gloria Ladson-Billings are known for taking up critical pedagogy and developing some terms like are culturally responsive pedagogies and culturally sustaining pedagogies. I encourage you to research each one of these scholars and researchers, educators, to learn more about their work. So some claims that critical literacy is built on is the idea that literacy is political. So what is meant by political here? It's not necessarily political parties, but certainly it could be connected political parties. But political in terms that people are making decisions about what kind of curriculum can be purchased in schools, what teachers have to use, and so that determines what kind of information or ideologies that students may have access to in the classroom. Also, if we think about standardized testing, which is an overwhelming concern right now in U.S. schools and education, that testing drives what kind of literacy will be valued in practice in schools. And then if we look very critically at what kind of books are just included in schools, what novels are high school students asked to read, what picture books are available for students to read in elementary school. Another claim that critical literacy rests on is that texts are never neutral. And so what that means is that you never take a text and just accept it as only fact. You need to know that it was authored by a person that had intent, and that intent was meant to frame certain people and events in specific ways. And so critical literacy asks for you to question that and interrogate it. So finally, literacy education or literacy pedagogy can oppress or liberate. We can imagine how literacy pedagogy can hurt students if we think about a common practice in U.S. classrooms called popcorn reading, or when teachers correct the dialectical variations of student language practices. But literacy instruction can also be liberating. So, for instance, students and teachers can take action with text. So you could write a text to make change. You can write text from a new perspective that has been left out, and you can use that to change your classroom, to change your school, and to change your community.